Hello and welcome to yet another new episode of In Depth. Post-independence, the electoral system espoused regimes whose key mandate was to govern the nation and promote the welfare of the common man and the society. Today we will see some of the key policies, initiatives and reforms introduced by different governments over a period of time. These reforms were destined to have far-reaching impact on the polity and country as a whole.
Minimum Wages Act 1948. Post-independence, our representatives wanted to create a development model based on public welfare. The country was also in the initial phase of industrialization and the labour sector was in transformation phase. The Parliament passed the Minimum Wage Act on 15th of March 1948 and conveyed its commitment towards protecting the interests of the working class. It also sent a direct message to the central and state governments, revealing its sense. The Parliament also made it clear that the minimum wages will be decided by the chosen representatives and not by the market forces. The goal of keeping the minimum wages concept in the Constitution was to provide a worker and his family a stable and happy life. The basic concept of the Minimum Wage Act 1948 is derived from the directive principles of state policy and Article 43, which state that the onus of providing basic wages, work facilities and opportunities to farmers and workers lies on the government. There were several reasons that spurred the making of Minimum Wage Act 1948, like in a free competitive market, labour wages, quality of labour are determined by the forces of demand and supply. Thus, the protection of the interests of workers is one of the basic objectives of this law. Apart from illiteracy, the Indian labour class is also not organised to protect its interest in a competitive market where supply of labour is always greater than demand. Under such conditions, the inherently weak working class fails to protect its legitimate interests. In developing countries like India, exploitation of labour is common in some industries. Here, unemployment forces labourers to work for very low wages. Therefore, the Act was enacted to protect the interest of the workers in the competitive market by providing a minimum wage limit. The Minimum Wage Act is also linked to many other laws like Trade Union Act of 1926, laws related to Wages Industrial Dispute Act of 1947, Equal Remuneration Act of 1976, provides equal wages for women labourers, Regulation and Elimination Contract Act 1970. But due to lack of education and information, the labourers hardly benefited from them. The situation is more challenging in the informal sector, where due to absence of collective bargaining, the workers are unable to negotiate and are forced to survive on lesser wages. It directly impacts employment generation and output. Though in small businesses, employers often lack the ability to comply with these laws. The Wage Bill Code 2017 was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 10th of August 2017. It covered 4 existing laws. Minimum Wages Act 1948, Wage Payment Act 1936, Payment of Bonus Act 1965 and the Equal Remuneration Act 1976. After the implementation of this law, all these 4 acts will get subsumed in it. Under the new law, Centre will also introduce National Minimum Wage Programme, which will cover the entire country. Here, the minimum wages will be decided by the centre and no state or organisation will be allowed to fix a wage lesser than that.
It started in Gujarat, where in 1965, Asia's first free trade zone was set up in Kantla. Along with Santa Cruz Export Processing Zone, these were two economic zones in India. But due to long-drawn permissions and red tape, they did not fare well. A lot of thought went into reviving them and boost their potential. The sector witnessed setting up of many advisory committees between 1978 to 1984.
Special economic zones. It started from Gujarat, where in 1965, Asia's first free trade zone was set up. Along with the Santa Cruz Export Processing Zone, these two economic areas existed in India in those days. But due to long-drawn legal processes and red tape, their true potential could hardly be harnessed. A lot of discussions happened in the government circles to find the way out. It resulted in several advisory committees being set up between 1978 and 1984. In 1978, Alexander Committee on Initiative and Foreign Policies. 1979, Douglas Committee on Controls and Subsidiaries. 1980, the London Committee on Export Strategy. 1982, Committee on FTZ and 100% EOU. 1984, Abid Hussain Committee on Trade Policy. Then, on 23rd of June 2005, the Parliament created Special Economic Zone Act 2005 to push this sunrise sector. The idea was to unleash and funneling their economic might in promoting additional financial activity, promoting the export of goods and services, promoting investment from domestic and foreign sources, creating employment opportunities, developing infrastructure. The new act offered tax rebates and holidays to those entities who were developing SEZ units. Prior to the 2005 law, there were 11 SEZs of central government, 9 belonged to the state governments and private sector. 405 more proposals were approved by 2016. 331 SEZs were notified till 2016, out of which 206 SEZs were functioning. According to statistics, till 30th of September 2016, SEZ sector had absorbed the investment of 4,06,690 crore rupees. It had created employment for about 16.88 lakh people. SEZs have also seen steady rise in exports, especially from the manufacturing sector. The SEZs enjoy legal status and facilities of a special zone. They are also known as deemed foreign territory. These zones are exempted from the export-import levy. They have world-class facilities for production and have access to cheap labor and the market. These zones normally absorb investment from the private sector and other entities. The central government supports the local commercial activities by offering concessions, tax holidays, land and infra development to the developers and the functional units. Till 22nd of January 2019, 421 formal permission to SEZ, 355 notified SEZs, 231 functional SEZs, 4,92,312 crore rupees total investment, 19,96,610 lakh total employment generated.
On July 19, 1969, the government nationalized 14 banks. The trigger lied in government taking many steps to boost the economy and trade post-independence. A lot of fund was needed, but most of the banks, which incidentally belonged to the private sector, failed to support the government. It hardly left the space for the government to maneuver. And eventually, the decision was taken to nationalize 14 top commercial banks. This decision proved to be a blessing in disguise.
for nationalization. Farm sector. SMEs were under severe financial crisis. Liberate the capital flow from the tight-fisted private sector banks to spread the banking sector in far-flung areas. Urban-rural economic balance eradication. Allocation of funds for schemes based on priority to promote banking among the masses. Nationalization of the banks came into effect from 19th of July 1969. These 14 large private commercial banks held about 70% of the country's deposits. These deposits came under the control of the government. It all happened due to the Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertakings Ordinance. It became law of the same name. According to experts, there were two more critical reasons that paved the way for the bank's nationalization. First, the manner in which these banks worked created anger in the public. According to media reports emanating from that period, around 361 banks were closed in the whole country between 1947 and 1955. These banks tanked with the earnings of thousands of citizens. No compensation was given as these banks did not indemnity to their account holders. Secondly, these banks were often seen associated with large industrial houses and traders. They usually ignored the interests of the farm sector and ordinary citizens. In 1950, the farmers got only 2.3% of the total loans distributed by these banks. In the next few years, the situation deteriorated further. In 1967, the share was further reduced to a mere 2.2%. With nationalization, agriculture and small industries benefited a lot. Although the maze of banking laws also increased, banks now normally keep around 40% of loans for agriculture and small industries. The bank branches in rural areas too have gone up. It was 8,261 in 1969. In the year 2000, their number increased to 65,521. Though a lot still needs to be done to consolidate the financial infrastructure in the rural areas, the primary goal of the government today is to strengthen the banking services and introduce customized products in the rural areas. The reforms are primed to funnel the welfare schemes down to the last person in the line. All these efforts will also stoke the growth of the savings sector.
Due to lack of information and education, often consumers are taken for a ride by the bright advertisements. They buy a certain product only to find problems in it. There was hardly any redressal. There was no legal recourse either. After repeated instances of consumer abuse, the government formulated to end consumer exploitation.
Consumer protection. Because of the lack of education and information in our country, consumers often get misled by the bright advertisements. Sometimes the services were not up to the mark. Most of the time, the concerned company cold-shouldered the complainants. Helplines too hardly existed. Most of the time, the company even denied any association with the consumer. For years, exploitation and fraud continued. Number of complaints soared. There was no law that could bring the erring entities to justice. The exploitation or fraud of the consumers was not limited to India alone. This problem cinched the consumers all over the world. Eventually, keeping in mind the growing helplessness and exploitation of the customers, the United Nations General Assembly advised its member countries to take necessary steps to mitigate the problem. The need for a legal shield was felt more acutely in the growing economies like India, because a customer has the right to hear. If he is cheated with whom he wants to complain, then such a customer should be given a proper forum. Right to health and safety. No salmon should be sold to any customer if it is harmful for its health and safety. Right to exploitation. It cannot be charged for any item or service from any customer. Right to inform. Under this, the company should give correct information about the right bonfire and the price of salmon or service by the company. These responsibilities are mainly of pharmaceutical companies and suppliers. Right to choose material or service. Every customer should have all the options for any item or services in order to make the right choice. Right to redress the problem. Every customer should have the right to complain and redress which can satisfy him. Then in 1986, the Consumer Protection Act 1986 was brought. It enabled the customers to take their grievances either to the Consumer Forum or National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission. This act was passed on 24th of December 1986. It intended to give information to the customer regarding the product, service, quality and price. The highlights of the act were: Consumer Protection Act, formation of Consumer Protection Councils, 3-level structure for redressal of grievances, 629 district forums, 35 state consumer disputes redressal commission, National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission set up in Delhi. Most of the cases filed under this arrangement have been done and dusted. To make this law even sharper, amendments were brought in 1991 and 2002. Though some laws did exist before this act came into force. Among them were Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1954, the Essential Commodities Act 1985, Agricultural Produce Grading and Marketing Act, Drugs Control Act, Drugs and Cosmetics Act, Standards of Weight and Measures Act, Drugs and Magic Remedies Objectionable Advertisement Act, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, Prevention of Black Marketing and Maintenance of Essential Commodities Act, and Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. The new act was passed in Parliament on 20th of December 2018. The new law carries a provision to create rules for curbing unfair trade practices in e-commerce sector. It can be said that as the Indian economy grows, the consumption increases, so will the complexities. It will also thus enhance the importance of laws related to consumer affairs.
The then government's intention was to reconcile the economic reforms, to reconnect India to the international market, to reduce inflation, to find ways, filling in the foreign currency reserves, to open the new venues for the private sector, and to create an economy which would promote productivity, skill and efficiency through competition. Today, India has become one of the fastest growing economy at the average rate of 7.5%.
Economic Reforms 1991. The economic reforms implemented on 24th of July 1991 transformed the economic landscape of the country. It was built on the foundations of some bitter realities like empty foreign currency coffers, runaway inflation in double digit, Reserve Bank inability to allocate funds for the development schemes. The red tape further aggravated the situation. The government of the day was left with only one option, the economic reforms, and it took some important steps in this direction. Industrial licensing was abolished for most industries. The condition of acceptance from all the projects where the foreign equity was with the imported commodity. The condition of giving the government permission to set up industries in the cities having population of more than 10 lakh. In FDI sanctions and 51% of foreign equity orders, selected industries were put in the priority class, constituted a special authority board. Under the foreign technology agreements, condition of acceptance in the high priority industries was terminated. Review of the public sector companies. Referring SIC companies to Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction Amendment of the MRTPC Act to control monopoly, restrictive and unfair trade practices. The gross domestic product or the GDP is often considered barometer of a country's economic health. In India, it was average of gross domestic product 1960s 3.6%, 1970s 3.4%, 1980s to 1990s 5.6%, 2000s 8.6%, 2011 to 2015 5.9%. Today, India has become one of the fastest growing economy globally. The credit goes to the continuing reforms.
Providing employment in the rural areas of India has always been a challenge. In 1952, the government initiated effort to start Community Development Program. In 1977, the Food for Work program began, which was later known as National Rural Employment Program or NREP. Its purpose was to create additional employment in the rural areas by using surplus stocks of grains left from buffer stock. In this arrangement, cereals were given in lieu of work. But the irony was, though the work was there, but there was no extra grain stock for distribution. The payments were late, the distribution centers were far away, and there were long, unending queues at the fair price ration shops. Bogged down by such shortcomings, the plan failed to fructify.
Manrega. Government then launched the Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program in 1983. The goal of this scheme was to provide employment to the poor landless families in rural areas. Under this program, at least one member of such families was provided work for 100 days annually. The plan to provide free farm wells to aid irrigation was also started. In 1989, it was the turn of Jawahar Rozgar Yojana. Both NREP and RLEGP were merged in this scheme. For your information, during these 3 decades, the rural sector witnessed launch of many employment generation schemes, which were partial success at the best. On 5th of September 2005, the then UPA government introduced National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which was known as Manrega. It was initially implemented in 200 districts of the country from 2nd of February 2006. The national rollout happened from 1st of April 2008. It was the biggest social security scheme in the world, driven majorly by the technology. There were several advantages of this scheme. It also had some flip sides that needed correction. A major drawback was the lack of assets creation. Second, such schemes were not considered permanent solution to the problems of the farm sector. Thirdly, according to the guidelines of NREGA, wage should be paid within 14 days of completion of the work. But either the payment was delayed or the money was not reaching the actual beneficiaries. In the coming years, the new government addressed these shortcomings seriously and made amendments like the scheme was linked to assets creation, that is to create tangible public property in the focus areas. Geotagging of all these assets. Till 20th of January 2019, Geo Manrega was operational in 31 states and union territories. Out of 4.08 crore targets, 3.40 crore has been achieved so far. The centre has asked the states to ensure that the beneficiaries are paid wages within 15 days directly in their bank accounts, which is linked with Aadhaar. To ensure transparency and complete the work within the given time frame, social auditors and self-help groups have been trained and made part of the scheme. To facilitate the implementation of the scheme, the government has consistently increased the budget allocation over the years. In 2014-15, 32,977 crore rupees. In 2017-18, 55,167 crore rupees. In 2018-19, 61,464 crore rupees.
On August 15, 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched Jan Dhan Yojana. On 28 August 2014, something special happened. In a single day, the nation witnessed opening of 1.5 crore Jan Dhan accounts. It is the part of Guinness Book of Records. It was the beginning of a journey whose core purpose was to ensure financial inclusion of the backward, poor and the population living on the fringe. Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana is the world's largest financial inclusion scheme.
Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan account. Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana is a winner since its launch.
इस प्रधानमंत्री जन धन योजना के माध्यम से हम देश के गरीब से गरीब लोगों को बैंक अकाउंट की सुविधा से जोड़ना चाहते हैं।
By this time, the bank account deposits stood at 73,690 crore rupees. Average per bank deposit 2,377 remained. These plans have achieved 100% targets in 27 states and union territories. Public sector banks too played a leading role in dissemination and promotion of the scheme. They created 24.5 crore beneficiaries. In comparison, private banks could open only about 9.7 crore accounts. Jan Dhan accounts come with government inputs like direct benefit transfer, gas-related subsidy, Manrega wage, etc. The Jan Dhan Yojana also ensures that the benefits of digitization reach rural areas and marginal communities. Jan Dhan Yojana forms the hub of government's efforts pertaining to financial inclusion. It aims at bringing banking services to the masses existing at the fringes. The success of the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana is creating a robust financial infrastructure at the grassroots. Many new schemes like Atal Pension Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana and Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana are piggy riding this scheme to reach the last man. As per information given by banks, 33.66 crore has been opened under the scheme until December 2018. Out of this, 28.16 crore accounts are operational. Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana accounts are actually saving accounts, and as per current RBI guidelines, there is no need to maintain the minimum balance in such accounts. Till January 2019, 34.03 crore accounts have been opened. These accounts have deposits worth 88,566.92 crore rupees. 53% of the account holders are women. 59% of the accounts are in villages or in the semi-rural areas to facilitate easy transactions. 17 crore Rupee debit cards have been distributed. These cards come with accident insurance coverage. The Yojana also offers beneficiaries overdraft facility of up to 10,000 rupees. The account holder can also take a loan under the Prime Minister's money scheme. The success of this scheme, and given the urgent need for the financial inclusion, the government has extended its functional period beyond September 2018. Now the plan is to ensure a bank account for every eligible citizen. According to the RBI report 2017-18, the number of people joining the banking system has doubled between 2011 and 2017, and the banking has reached 80% of the populace. We can compare this scenario with China, and within the BRICS community, India is far ahead.
So today we articulated the initiatives, policies and laws unleashed by different regimes over a period of time. All these initiatives materialized in different decades, stemmed from different ideologies, but the goal was clear: finding ways and means of public welfare, even if the themes were not part of the party's manifestos. Here, in this episode, with limited time on our hand, we tried flagging the key markers attached to these reforms or initiatives. Maybe in the future we shall certainly go into the details. But today, we take your leave. Goodbye.